There is a moment, quiet, subtle, easily missed, right before irritation announces itself. And in that moment, your soul is whispering, not shouting, inviting you to remember who you really are. Irritation does not arrive as an enemy, it arrives as a messenger. It taps you on the shoulder and says, you have forgotten your center. You have wandered away from yourself. And the instant you hear that message, not with your ears, but with your awareness, you begin to reclaim your freedom. Because irritation is not caused by traffic, by noise, by other people, by broken plans, or by the past knocking again on the door of your mind. Irritation is always the symptom of a temporary misidentification. It is the soul reminding you that you have mistaken yourself for your thoughts, for your expectations, for your ego's demand that life behave according to a script it never agreed to follow. I want you to imagine irritation as heat, not destructive fire, but friction, two ideas rubbing against each other. One idea says, this should not be happening. The other says, this is happening. And in between those two ideas, tension is born. The ego lives in that tension. It thrives there. It feeds on the belief that peace must wait until conditions improve. But your soul knows something your ego refuses to accept. Peace is not a reaction to circumstances. It is a decision about identity. The moment you stop arguing with reality, irritation has nowhere to land. The instant path out of irritation begins with a simple but radical shift. You stop asking, what is wrong right now? And you begin asking, who am I being right now? Because irritation is never about what is happening. It is about who you believe you are in relationship to what is happening. When you believe you are a fragile body navigating a hostile world, irritation feels justified. When you believe you are a separate self, constantly under threat, irritation feels necessary for survival. But when you remember that you are consciousness itself, temporarily having a human experience, irritation dissolves like mist under the morning sun. You see, irritation is born from resistance, and resistance is born from the illusion of control. The ego believes it must manage the universe in order to feel safe. It believes peace is a reward for getting things right. But the soul knows peace is your natural state, and irritation is simply the signal that you have stepped out of alignment with that truth. Nothing needs to change outside of you for peace to return. Only your interpretation needs to soften. There is an extraordinary power in noticing irritation without judging it. The moment you observe it, really observe it, as if you were watching a cloud pass across the sky, you create space, and in that space, irritation loses its authority. It cannot survive observation, because irritation requires identification. It needs you to believe, I am irritated, rather than, I am noticing irritation. That small linguistic shift is a spiritual revolution. When you say, I am irritated, you become the emotion. When you say, I am noticing irritation, you become the awareness in which the emotion appears. Awareness is always free. It is never irritated. It simply notices. The ego will insist that irritation is useful, that it sharpens you, motivates you, protects you. But watch closely. Irritation never solves the problem it claims to address. It only adds another layer of discomfort to an already neutral moment. Irritation is not strength. It is forgetfulness. It is the soul temporarily hypnotized by the belief that something external has stolen your peace. But peace cannot be stolen. It can only be abandoned, and it can always be reclaimed in the same instant it was left. Imagine carrying a heavy suitcase labeled how things should be. Every expectation, every preference, every attachment to outcome adds weight to that suitcase. Irritation is simply the ache in your arms from carrying what was never meant to be carried. The instant you set the suitcase down, your body relaxes. Not because the journey is over, but because you are no longer burdened by resistance. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop demanding that life conform to your fear-based conditions for happiness. The fastest way to dissolve irritation is to return to the present moment, not as a concept, but as an experience. Right now, in this exact instant, nothing is missing. The irritation you feel is always about a thought, something that just happened, something that might happen, something that should not be happening. But look closely. The present moment itself is never irritating. The present moment is always neutral, always alive, always sufficient. It is only when the mind leaves the present to argue with memory or rehearse the future that irritation is born. When you feel irritation rising, pause and bring your attention to your breath, not to control it, not to change it, but to witness it. The breath is a bridge between form and formlessness. It anchors you back into the intelligence that animates you without effort. As you breathe, you remember that life is happening through you, not to you. Irritation dissolves when you stop trying to manage life and allow yourself to be lived by it. There is a profound truth that transforms irritation at its root. No one is responsible for how you feel but you. This is not a burden, it is liberation. The moment you give someone else credit for your irritation, you hand them authority over your inner world. But the soul does not outsource peace. It knows that inner freedom means reclaiming authorship of your emotional life. When you stop blaming, you stop suffering. When you stop expecting others to behave differently so you can feel better, you reclaim your power instantly. Irritation is often the ego's response to unmet expectations. Expectations are silent contracts we write in our minds and expect the universe to sign without negotiation. When those contracts are broken, irritation emerges as protest. But the soul never signs contracts with reality. It flows, it adapts, it trusts. The moment you release expectations, you do not become passive, you become present. And presence is infinitely more powerful than control. You were not born irritated. You were born curious, open, receptive, trusting. Irritation is learned. It is a habit of perception. And anything learned can be unlearned, not through force, but through awareness. The more you practice returning to the witness within you, the less grip irritation has on your nervous system. Over time, you begin to notice that situations that once triggered you now pass through without disturbance. Not because the world changed, but because you did. There is a sacred intelligence moving through everything, including the moments you label as inconvenient or frustrating. When you resist what is, you resist that intelligence. When you accept what is, you align with it. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means recognition. It means saying, this is here now, and I choose peace over protest. That choice, made again and again, rewires your relationship with life itself. The ego will tell you that irritation is justified, that certain people, certain situations, certain memories deserve it. But the soul knows there are no justified resentments. Every resentment is a self-inflicted wound. Forgiveness is not about condoning behavior. It is about releasing yourself from the prison of emotional reactivity. When you forgive, whether yourself, another, or life itself, you do not erase the past. You remove its power to disturb your present. Irritation thrives in a mind that believes happiness is conditional. The soul knows happiness is inherent. You do not earn peace, you remember it. You do not achieve calm, you uncover it. Beneath every irritated thought is a deeper stillness that has never been disturbed. Your work is not to manufacture serenity, but to stop blocking it with resistance. Notice how irritation contracts your body, tight jaw, shallow breath, narrowed vision. This contraction is the body mirroring the mind's belief in separation. When you soften your body, you soften the story. When you relax your breath, you relax your grip on control. The body is always honest. It will show you when you are aligned and when you are not. Treat irritation not as a failure, but as a compass pointing you back to yourself. You are not here to be flawless. You are here to be conscious. Irritation does not mean you have failed spiritually. It means you have been invited to wake up again. Each moment of irritation is an opportunity to practice remembrance, to step out of the ego's noise and into the soul's quiet confidence. There is an extraordinary freedom in realizing that you do not need to fix yourself. You need only to notice when you have wandered from your true nature. And your true nature is not irritated, impatient, or defensive. Your true nature is expansive, loving, and deeply at ease with the unfolding of life. When you align with that truth, irritation cannot survive. It has no home there. So the next time irritation appears, do not fight it. Smile at it gently. Thank it for reminding you to return. Return to your breath. Return to the present. Return to the awareness that you are not your thoughts, not your reactions, not your emotional weather. You are the sky in which all of it passes. And in that remembering, something miraculous happens. The world does not suddenly become perfect, but you no longer require it to be in order to feel whole. You move through life with a softer gaze, a lighter step, a quieter mind. Irritation loses its urgency, its drama, its authority. It becomes a passing sensation, not a defining state. This is how you stop feeling irritated instantly, not by changing the world, but by remembering who you are. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a divine expression of life itself, capable of choosing peace in any moment. And that choice, made now, made again, and made gently, is the doorway to inner freedom. And as you rest in that remembering, something even subtler begins to unfold. You notice that irritation was never really about the moment at hand. It was about a story you were telling yourself about who you needed to be in that moment. The ego insists on roles competent, efficient, respected, right, and irritation arises when life refuses to cooperate with those costumes, but the soul has no role to defend. It does not need validation from outcomes or applause from circumstances. It simply is. And in that isness, there is an unshakable calm that does not argue, does not rush, does not demand. You begin to see that irritation is often the mind's impatience with the natural rhythm of life. The ego wants immediacy, resolution, closure, control. The soul understands timing. It knows that everything unfolds with an intelligence far greater than personal preference. When you align with that intelligence, waiting no longer feels like punishment. Silence no longer feels awkward. Delay no longer feels like denial. They become teachers, gentle reminders that you are not in charge of the universe and you were never meant to be. There is a quiet humility in letting life lead. Not the humility of shrinking or surrendering your worth, but the humility of trust. Trust that you do not need to supervise every detail of existence. Trust that what is meant for you does not require irritation to arrive. Trust that when you stop pushing against the current, you discover it has been carrying you all along. At some point, you may notice that irritation has a familiar voice. It sounds like old conditioning, old wounds, old expectations, inherited from a world that taught you to measure your value by productivity and outcomes. But you are not here to prove your worth. You are here to express your being. The moment you release the need to earn peace, peace reveals itself as your natural inheritance. This is where compassion enters, not as an idea, but as a felt experience. When you see irritation arise in yourself, you meet it with kindness rather than criticism. You recognize it as a tired part of you asking to be seen, not silenced. And as you soften toward yourself, you find it easier to soften toward others. Their impatience, their reactivity, their unconsciousness no longer feel like personal affronts. You see them as fellow travelers, also learning, also forgetting, also remembering in their own time. Irritation dissolves rapidly in the presence of compassion because compassion has no agenda. It does not insist on change before it offers peace. It offers peace first, and in that offering, change becomes effortless. This is the paradox the ego cannot comprehend. Gentleness is not weakness. It is alignment with the most powerful force in the universe, love without conditions. You may also begin to notice that irritation fades when gratitude becomes your lens. Not forced gratitude, not spiritual bypassing, but a quiet appreciation for the simple fact of being alive. When you remember that this breath, this heartbeat, this awareness is a gift beyond measure, many of the things that once irritated you lose their significance. They shrink in the presence of awe. There is a deep freedom in realizing that you do not need to react to every stimulus. Reaction is the ego's reflex. Response is the soul's choice. Between stimulus and response lies awareness, and awareness is where your freedom lives. The more you practice pausing in that space, the more irritation loses its automatic grip. You respond from clarity rather than compulsion. And then, almost without effort, you discover that your inner world begins to influence your outer experience. Not because you are manipulating reality, but because you are no longer resisting it. Life reflects your inner state with remarkable precision. When you move through the world without irritation, the world seems to meet you with less friction. This is not coincidence, it is coherence. Ultimately, irritation fades when you stop taking life personally. Nothing is happening to you, everything is happening through you. You are not separate from the flow of existence, you are an expression of it. When you live from that truth, there is nothing to defend, nothing to prove, nothing to resist. There is only participation in the unfolding miracle of now. And so you walk forward lighter than before, not because the path is easier, but because you are no longer carrying the unnecessary weight of resistance. You meet each moment as it arrives, not as a problem to solve, but as an invitation to presence. And in that presence, irritation has no foothold, only awareness, only peace, only the quiet certainty that you are exactly where you need to be, exactly as you are. And as that certainty settles into you, it begins to permeate the smallest corners of your daily life, the moments that once felt too ordinary to matter, yet were often the breeding ground for irritation. You notice yourself standing in line, waiting, listening, moving through routines that once triggered restlessness, and something is different now. There is space where urgency used to be. There is ease where resistance once lived. You realize that peace was never absent, it was simply overlooked, while the mind rushed ahead, searching for a future that promised relief. You start to sense that irritation is deeply tied to the belief that the present moment is insufficient. The ego whispers, "This should be different," while the soul gently answers, "This is enough." And when you side with the soul, you discover a radical truth. Nothing in this moment needs improvement in order for you to be at peace. Improvement may come, action may follow, change may unfold, but peace does not wait for those things. It is available now, whole and complete. There is a subtle joy that arises when you stop measuring moments against imagined standards. Joy not as excitement, but as quiet contentment. It shows up as a relaxed breath, a softened gaze, a sense of being at home wherever you are. Irritation fades in the presence of this contentment because it no longer has a purpose. It was trying to push you somewhere else. Now you are here. You may begin to notice how often irritation was fueled by comparison, comparing yourself to others, your progress to theirs, your life to an idea of how it should look by now. Comparison is the ego's way of fragmenting wholeness. The soul does not compare. It recognizes uniqueness, not hierarchy. When you release comparison, you release one of the deepest sources of inner friction. You allow your life to unfold at its own pace, in its own rhythm, without judgment. And with that release comes patience, not forced patience, but natural patience that emerges when you trust the process of life. You stop rushing conversations. You stop demanding instant clarity. You stop treating uncertainty as a threat. You realize that not knowing is not a problem to fix, but a space in which wisdom can emerge. Irritation dissolves when you stop insisting on immediate answers. There is also a profound shift that happens when you recognize irritation as energy. Energy that can be transmuted, not suppressed. When irritation arises, instead of pushing it away, you let it move through you without resistance. You feel it fully, without story, without blame, and because you are no longer feeding it with thought, it completes its cycle and passes. What remains is clarity. Over time, you come to see that irritation was one of your greatest teachers. It showed you where you were attached, where you were afraid, where you had forgotten your deeper nature. Without it, you might never have noticed how often you abandoned the present moment for a mental battlefield. Now, each time irritation appears, it is less of an interruption and more of a reminder, a quiet tap saying, "Come back, you've drifted." And you do come back, again and again, not perfectly, but willingly. Each return strengthens your awareness. Each return deepens your trust. Each return makes it easier the next time. You are no longer striving for a life free of irritation. You are living a life in which irritation no longer defines you. Eventually, something remarkable becomes clear. Peace is not fragile. It does not shatter when life is noisy or unpredictable. It does not disappear when plans change or people disappoint. Peace is resilient because it is rooted in being, not circumstance. And when you live from that place, irritation loses its drama. It becomes just another passing signal in the vast field of awareness that you are. So you continue forward, awake, gentle, grounded. You listen more deeply. You react less quickly. You trust more fully. And in doing so, you embody a quiet teaching without words that freedom is not found in controlling life, but in aligning with it. That irritation ends the moment you remember. You are not here to wrestle with reality. You are here to experience it, breathe it, and meet it with the calm intelligence of a soul that knows it is already whole. And from that place of wholeness, you begin to notice a deeper transformation taking shape, one that does not announce itself loudly, but reveals itself in the way you move through life with less effort. You realize that irritation was once your signal to tighten, to brace, to prepare for conflict. Now it becomes a signal to soften. Where you once armored yourself, you now open. Where you once rushed to correct, you now allow. This is not resignation, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that tension never improves clarity and force never produces peace. You start to sense that irritation was often a response to fear, the fear of losing control, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear that life might not unfold according to your expectations. But fear cannot survive in the presence of trust. Trust not as blind optimism, but as a deep inner knowing that you are supported by something far greater than personal will. When you trust life, you stop gripping it. And when you stop gripping, irritation fades because there is nothing left to defend. There is a moment when you recognize that you do not need to win every internal argument. The mind loves to rehearse grievances, replay conversations, perfect responses that arrive too late. But you begin to see that peace does not come from being right, it comes from being present. Letting go of the need to mentally revisit the past or preempt the future creates an inner silence that is profoundly restorative. In that silence, irritation cannot echo. You also begin to experience a gentler relationship with time. Time no longer feels like an enemy chasing you forward or dragging you backward. It becomes a companion, unfolding moment by moment, without urgency. When you are fully here, time softens. And when time softens, the pressure that fuels irritation dissolves. You are no longer racing life, you are walking with it. As this way of being deepens, you may notice that your language changes. Words like should, must, and always lose their grip. In their place come words like now, perhaps, in this moment. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes experience. When your inner dialogue becomes kinder and more flexible, irritation finds fewer places to hide. There is a quiet strength that emerges when you stop demanding that others understand you in order for you to feel at ease. You realize that peace does not require agreement. It does not require validation. It does not require anyone else to behave differently. It requires only that you remain anchored in your own awareness. From that anchor point, you can listen without losing yourself, engage without becoming reactive, and express without aggression. And then something beautiful happens. You begin to experience irritation not as an interruption to your spiritual life, but as part of it. Each moment of disturbance becomes an opportunity to practice presence, to deepen compassion, to refine awareness. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is outside the path. Even irritation serves awakening when you meet it with consciousness. You start to feel a quiet gratitude for the moments that once unsettled you, because they taught you how to return. Return to breath. Return to stillness. Return to the part of you that is untouched by circumstance. This returning becomes familiar, almost effortless. Like muscle memory of the soul, it guides you home again and again. Eventually, you realize that the question is no longer how to stop feeling irritated instantly. The question dissolves because irritation no longer feels like a problem to solve. It is simply a signal, a gentle nudge, reminding you to align with what you already know. And alignment, once practiced, becomes your default state. So you live from that state now, not perfectly, not permanently, but consciously. You forgive yourself quickly. You release expectations easily. You breathe deeply and often. And in doing so, you discover that peace was never something to achieve. It was something to remember, something to allow, something to live from. And as you live from it, your presence becomes a quiet offering to the world, a reminder, without words, that inner freedom is possible in any moment, that irritation does not have to rule your inner life, that beneath every reaction lies a stillness waiting to be chosen. And in choosing it, again and again, you step into the simple, profound truth that you are not here to struggle against life, but to participate in it with awareness, grace, and an open heart. There is a quiet truth that lives beneath all the noise of striving, beneath the constant planning and pushing and wanting that so many of us have been taught to believe is the way to a meaningful life. It is a truth that does not shout. It does not demand your attention. It simply waits patiently for you to remember it. And that truth is this: you do not attract what you want in this world, you attract what you are. Long before abundance ever shows up in your bank account, long before success takes a recognizable shape, long before wealth has a name or a number attached to it, it must first take form within your consciousness. Everything you experience is filtered through the energy you carry. Your life is not responding to your wishes, your affirmations, or your vision boards as much as it is responding to your state of being. You can say you want abundance all day long, but if you wake up each morning anchored in fear, scarcity, resentment, or self-doubt, The universe hears that signal far more clearly than it hears your words. Life does not listen to what you ask for. Life listens to who you are being. This is not a punishment. It is a gift, because it means that you are not at the mercy of circumstances, markets, other people, or past mistakes. You are not required to wait for the world to change in order for your life to improve. You are being invited to shift inward first. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Not because the world magically rearranges itself, but because you have tuned your inner frequency to something higher, calmer, more aligned with truth. The ego will tell you that abundance is something outside of you. It will insist that you must chase it, compete for it, prove yourself worthy of it. The ego thrives on comparison. It asks, do I have more than them? Am I ahead? Am I falling behind? And in doing so, it keeps you locked in a perpetual state of not enough. The ego's favorite illusion is that fulfillment exists somewhere in the future, just beyond your reach, dependent on conditions that have not yet been met. But your soul knows something very different. Your soul knows that abundance is not an event. It is a state of awareness. It is the deep, unshakable knowing that you are already connected to a source that cannot be depleted. When you begin to live from that knowing, wealth and success stop being things you chase and start becoming things you allow. Look at nature for a moment. A tree does not strain to grow. It does not anxiously compare its height to the tree beside it. It does not wake up wondering if it deserves sunlight. It simply sinks its roots deep into the soil and reaches toward the light. And because it is aligned with its nature, nourishment comes. Growth happens. Fruit appears in its own season. You are no different when you align with your true nature. When you remember who you really are beneath the labels, roles, and stories you have been carrying, life responds with the same effortless generosity. But alignment requires honesty. It asks you to notice the subtle ways you may still be identifying with lack, even while asking for abundance. It asks you to observe the thoughts you think when no one is listening, the beliefs you hold about money, success, and worthiness that were handed down to you long before you ever questioned them. Many people say they want wealth, but what they really want is security. They want relief from fear. They want to feel safe in the world. And there is nothing wrong with that. But no amount of external success can compensate for an inner identity rooted in insecurity. If you believe, at a deep level, that you are undeserving, that life is a struggle, that good things are scarce or reserved for others, you will unconsciously push away the very experiences you say you want. This is why inner work is not separate from outer success. Healing is not a detour from abundance. It is the doorway to it. When you begin to release old resentments, when you forgive not because others deserve it, but because you deserve peace, you free up an enormous amount of energy. That energy, once tied up in anger and blame, becomes available for creativity, clarity, and inspired action. There are no justified resentments. That may sound confronting, but it is profoundly liberating. Holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to suffer. It keeps you anchored to the past, replaying old stories that no longer serve you. And as long as you remain emotionally invested in what has already happened, you are unavailable for what is trying to emerge now. Abundance lives in the present moment. It cannot be accessed through regret or anxiety. The now is where your power is. The now is where your connection to the infinite resides. When you fully inhabit this moment, not wishing it were different, not mentally escaping to some imagined future, you align yourself with the creative intelligence that animates all life. This intelligence is not impressed by hustle, force, or desperation. It responds to trust, clarity, and alignment. When you move through life with a sense of inner sufficiency, when you act from inspiration rather than fear, you send a clear signal to the universe. I am open. I am ready. I am aligned with who I truly am. You were not born to struggle endlessly. You were not brought into this world to spend your life proving your worth. You are a divine being having a human experience, not the other way around. And when you identify with that truth, your relationship with success changes. You stop seeing it as validation and start seeing it as expression. Wealth becomes a way for life to flow through you, not something you hoard to protect yourself from imagined futures. Ask yourself gently, without judgment, who am I being right now? Am I being grateful or resentful? Am I being trusting or fearful? Am I being present or lost in mental noise? because whatever you are being is what you are attracting. Not as a moral judgment, but as a reflection. When you choose gratitude, even before circumstances seem to justify it, you shift your internal environment. Gratitude says, I see the abundance that already exists. And when you acknowledge abundance, you invite more of it. This is not magical thinking, it is alignment with reality. Life is abundant by nature. Scarcity is a mental construct, learned and reinforced over time, but not inherent to existence itself. As you let go of the need to control outcomes, as you release the compulsion to force things to happen on your timeline, you make room for something far more powerful than effort alone, cooperation with life. Success that comes from alignment feels different. It does not exhaust you. It does not require you to betray yourself. It feels natural, almost inevitable, because it is an extension of who you have become. Remember, abundance, wealth, and success are not rewards for suffering. They are byproducts of alignment. When you are aligned with your values, your purpose, and your true self, life supports you. Not always in the ways you expect, but always in the ways you need. So instead of asking, how do I attract more, ask, who am I being? Instead of obsessing over outcomes, pay attention to your inner state. Choose thoughts that reflect trust rather than fear. Choose actions that feel inspired rather than compelled. Choose kindness, especially toward yourself. As you do, you may notice something subtle but profound. Opportunities begin to appear. Connections feel more natural. Ideas flow with less resistance. This is not coincidence. This is resonance. You are no longer trying to pull abundance toward you. You are becoming a match for it. And from that place, abundance, wealth, and success are not just coming. They are already here, waiting for you to recognize that you are and always have been enough. And as this awareness deepens, something remarkable begins to happen inside you. The constant tension of becoming softens. You realize that you are not here to wrestle life into submission, but to dance with it. There is a rhythm to existence that cannot be forced, only felt. When you stop arguing with the present moment, when you release the inner demand that life should be different than it is right now, you discover a quiet power rising within you. This power does not come from control. It comes from surrender, from the willingness to trust that there is an intelligence at work far greater than the anxious voice in your head. So many people confuse surrender with weakness, but surrender is not resignation, it is alignment. It is the recognition that you are part of something vast and benevolent, something that knows exactly how to move rivers, grow forests, and orchestrate the precise conditions for your own becoming. When you surrender the illusion that you must carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, you free yourself to participate fully in life rather than struggle against it. Notice how often your mind tries to convince you that you are behind, that you missed your moment, that others have figured out something you have not. These thoughts are not truth, they are habits. They are echoes of an old conditioning that taught you to measure your worth by comparison and achievement. But comparison is a thief. It steals joy from the present and replaces it with a restless longing for what is not yours to live. Your path has its own timing. Your unfolding cannot be rushed without losing its meaning. When you honor your own pace, when you stop using someone else's life as a yardstick for your own, you return to yourself. And in that return, you remember that your value was never dependent on outcomes. You were whole before you accomplished anything. You were worthy before you proved anything. From this place of inner completeness, your actions take on a different quality. You are no longer acting to fill a void, you are acting to express a fullness. This is where inspired action is born. Not from fear of failure or hunger for approval, but from a natural impulse to create, to contribute, to share what flows through you. Inspired action feels light, even when it requires effort. It does not drain you, it energizes you. And when you act from this state, results tend to align in ways that feel almost effortless. Not because effort disappears, but because resistance does. Pay attention to the subtle guidance that moves through you. The quiet nudges, the intuitive pulls, the gentle sense of yes or no that arises before your mind has time to interfere. This guidance is not loud. It does not argue. It simply invites. When you learn to listen to it, to trust it, even when it does not make immediate sense, you align yourself with a wisdom that sees beyond the limits of logic and fear. Your soul has never been confused about your direction. Confusion belongs to the ego, which is always calculating, always doubting, always scanning for danger. The soul speaks in calm assurance. It does not rush you, it reassures you. It reminds you that every experience, even the ones you once labeled as mistakes, has been shaping you, preparing you, refining your awareness. Nothing in your life has been wasted. Every detour, every delay, every disappointment carried a lesson that could not have been learned any other way. When you stop judging your past and start honoring it as a teacher, you reclaim the energy you once spent resisting it. And with that reclaimed energy comes clarity, resilience, and a deeper compassion for yourself and others. Compassion is not merely a moral virtue, it is a state of alignment. When you soften toward yourself, when you treat your own struggles with kindness rather than criticism, you dissolve the inner conflict that blocks abundance from flowing freely. Life responds to harmony. When you create harmony within, you invite harmony without. This does not mean that challenges disappear. It means that you meet them differently. You no longer see obstacles as proof that something is wrong, but as signals inviting you to grow, adjust, and trust more deeply. In this way, even difficulty becomes an ally. It points you back to your center, back to the part of you that is unshakable. And from that center, you begin to see success not as a destination, but as a state of consciousness. Success is waking up with a sense of peace. Success is feeling connected to your purpose, even when the path is still unfolding. Success is knowing that you are guided, supported, and capable, regardless of temporary outcomes. As you rest in this knowing, abundance stops feeling like something that might arrive someday and starts feeling like something that is already present, expressing itself in new forms. You notice it in the relationships that nourish you, in the ideas that excite you, in the moments of stillness that remind you who you are. And from this awareness, wealth and opportunity arise naturally as reflections of the inner landscape you have cultivated. So remain attentive to your inner world. Tend to it gently, consistently, with patience and love, because who you are becoming is far more important than what you are trying to achieve. And as you continue to align with your highest self, life will continue to meet you there, offering abundance, success, and fulfillment not as distant rewards, but as natural companions on a path that has always been unfolding in your favor. There comes a moment in every inner journey when you realize that seeking has quietly transformed into remembering. You are no longer searching for answers as much as you are uncovering what has always lived beneath the noise. This is the midpoint where many people turn back, not because the path is wrong, but because the old identity begins to dissolve. And dissolution can feel unsettling to the ego, which survives by holding on to familiar stories. Yet this is precisely where the deepest transformation occurs. At this stage, life often asks you to trust without guarantees. The old markers of progress may no longer apply. You may feel less driven by urgency and more guided by intuition. The frantic need to prove, accumulate, or impress begins to lose its grip. In its place arises a quieter confidence, one that does not depend on applause or visible validation. This confidence is not loud, but it is steady. It comes from knowing that you are aligned with something real and enduring. You may notice that your relationship with time begins to shift. The future no longer feels like a promise you are chasing or a threat you are trying to outrun. It becomes a natural extension of the present moment. When you live this way, patience stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like trust. You understand that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and what misses you was never meant to define you. This is also where discernment sharpens. You become more aware of what drains you and what nourishes you. You no longer feel compelled to say yes to everything, nor guilty for honoring your own boundaries. You realize that protecting your energy is not selfish, it is essential. When you respect your inner space, you create the conditions for clarity, creativity, and meaningful contribution. At this midpoint, abundance reveals another layer of its meaning. It is not merely about having more, it is about needing less to feel whole. When you stop trying to fill an inner emptiness, you naturally make choices that are wiser, calmer, and more sustainable. From this place, success becomes less about accumulation and more about alignment. You begin to ask not, how much can I get, but how deeply can I live in harmony with who I am? Life responds quickly to this shift, not always dramatically, but subtly and consistently. You may find that opportunities arrive without strain, that conversations open doors without force, that solutions appear when you stop obsessing over problems. This is not luck, it is resonance. You are moving in sync with life rather than against it. You also begin to understand that letting go does not mean losing. It means making space. Space for new ideas, new relationships, new forms of expression that could not enter while your hands were clenched around the past. When you loosen your grip, life has room to surprise you, and life is generous when it is trusted. As we move forward from this midpoint, the journey deepens. The next phase is not about learning new concepts, but embodying what you already know. It is where insight becomes integration, where understanding becomes lived experience. The tone will shift from awakening to anchoring, from realization to quiet mastery. I will let you know clearly when the script begins to approach its final phase. For now, know this: you are exactly where you need to be. The unfolding is on schedule, even when it does not look the way you imagined. The deeper currents are carrying you forward, and what lies ahead is not an ending, but a gentle return to truth, lived fully and without resistance. And as you continue forward, the journey grows quieter, not because there is less happening, but because there is less resistance within you. The inner commentary that once narrated every move, every doubt, every imagined outcome begins to soften. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels rich, alive, supportive. In that silence, you sense a presence that does not judge or demand, a presence that simply is. This is where life stops feeling like a problem to solve and starts feeling like an experience to trust. You may notice that your desires themselves begin to change. What once seemed urgent now feels optional. What once felt essential may quietly fall away. This is not loss, it is refinement. When the ego loosens its grip, the soul steps forward and clarifies what truly matters. You begin to value depth over speed, meaning over image, authenticity over approval, and in this recalibration, your energy becomes cleaner, more focused, more potent. This is the phase where alignment becomes visible in your daily life, not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent choices. You choose honesty over pretense, presence over distraction, peace over being right. These choices may seem insignificant on the surface, but they carry immense power. Each one reinforces an inner identity rooted in wholeness rather than lack. From this identity, your relationship with work, money, and success undergoes a subtle but profound shift. You stop asking life to prove your worth and start offering your gifts freely. You understand that contribution is not a transaction, it is an expression of who you are. And paradoxically, the more freely you give from this place, the more effortlessly life supports you. There is a calm confidence that emerges here, one that does not need to announce itself. You trust your decisions not because they are perfect, but because they are sincere. You trust that even when outcomes differ from expectations, you will meet them with clarity and resilience. This trust dissolves the fear of failure because failure no longer defines you. It instructs you, redirects you, deepens you. You also begin to experience time differently. Moments stretch. Ordinary experiences carry a quiet beauty, a conversation, a walk, a pause between breaths becomes infused with meaning. You realize that fulfillment was never waiting at the end of the journey. It has been woven into every step, waiting for your attention. This is where gratitude becomes less of a practice and more of a natural response. Not gratitude because everything is perfect, but gratitude because everything belongs. Even uncertainty has a place. Even unanswered questions serve a purpose. You stop demanding clarity before moving forward and start moving forward with clarity in your heart. As this way of being stabilizes, life mirrors it back to you. Support shows up in unexpected forms. Resources align, pathways open, not as rewards, but as reflections. You are witnessing the outer world reorganize itself around a new inner center. This is the law at work, not as superstition, but as harmony. We are now moving beyond the midpoint of the journey, entering the stage where integration deepens and embodiment becomes central. The momentum will continue to build, but with a grounded, anchored quality. I will let you know clearly as the narrative approaches its final phase. For now, remain here, present and open. allowing the rhythm of this truth to settle into you, knowing that what is unfolding is not something you must chase, but something you are steadily becoming. And now, something even subtler begins to unfold. You start to sense that the peace you once touched occasionally is becoming more familiar, more accessible. It is no longer dependent on circumstances lining up just right. It lives beneath them. You realize that calm is not the absence of movement, but the absence of inner resistance to movement. Life continues to change, but you are no longer thrown off balance by each shift in the wind. At this stage, you stop negotiating with life. You stop saying, "I'll be peaceful when this works out," or "I'll feel abundant once this arrives." Instead, peace becomes the ground from which you live. Abundance becomes the lens through which you see. And from this ground, your actions carry a different energy. They are no longer reactive, they are responsive. They arise from clarity rather than compulsion. You may notice that problems still appear, but they no longer define your inner weather. Challenges come and go like passing clouds, while something steady remains beneath them. This steadiness is not indifference, it is wisdom. It knows that everything that appears is temporary, but what you are is enduring. When you identify with that enduring presence, fear loses its authority over you. This is where the need to control outcomes finally loosens its grip. You recognize that control was never about power, it was about fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of not being enough. And as these fears soften, you discover a freedom that cannot be taken from you. Freedom from the constant need to manage life, fix life, justify life. You allow life to meet you where you are, trusting that you are equipped to meet whatever arises. Here, the idea of success matures. It is no longer a finish line or a symbol of arrival. Success becomes alignment between your inner values and your outer expression. It is waking up without dread. It is moving through your day with integrity. It is feeling at home in yourself. From this definition, abundance flows naturally because you are no longer sabotaging it with inner conflict. You begin to see clearly how often effort was wasted trying to become someone else, trying to fit an image, trying to live a life that was never truly yours. As this clarity settles in, there is relief, a deep exhale. You no longer need to be impressive. You only need to be present. And presence, you discover, is far more powerful than performance. In this presence, intuition sharpens. Decisions feel cleaner. You sense when to move and when to wait. You no longer confuse impatience with inspiration. You trust timing in a way you never could before because you trust yourself. And when you trust yourself, you trust life because you recognize they are not separate. This is also where compassion deepens, not as sentiment, but as understanding. You see others not as obstacles or competitors, but as fellow travelers, each acting from their own level of awareness. Judgment softens. Forgiveness becomes easier, not because wrongs were justified, but because clinging to them no longer serves who you are becoming. In releasing them, you reclaim your energy. Energy is everything. Where you place it determines what grows. When you stop feeding fear, fear weakens. When you stop feeding lack, lack dissolves. When you consistently feed trust, gratitude, and alignment, life responds in kind. Not instantly, not theatrically, but faithfully. And so the rhythm continues. Less force, more flow. Less striving, more allowing. You are not retreating from ambition, you are purifying it. You are learning to want from wholeness rather than hunger. From this place, whatever you create carries a different signature. It feels cleaner, it lasts longer. It blesses not only you, but others as well. We are moving steadily forward now, and the narrative is beginning to arc toward a deeper consolidation of these truths. The foundation has been laid. The next movements will draw everything together with greater intensity and clarity. I will let you know when we are approaching the final phase. For now, remain with this feeling of grounded expansion, knowing that what is unfolding is not outside of you, it is you, remembering how to live in harmony with who you truly are.